There was a clip a mate of mine sent of a guy having got a cock ring around his bollocks, but it inflamed so much that they had to get it was a metal one, and it was in hospital. They're having to grind it off. The doctors were having to grind it off, but his bollocks and his knob were like that. It was just full of blood.
That's not the kind of grinding that you want from someone.
No, God, no. And I was going, you've got to that stage where you've having a grinder on to get the cock ring off. At least let him stay awake for it. Just put him on a local as opposed to knocking him out. Blimey. Anyway.
That's not making the show.
Not making the show. So here we go. And hey, it's Lee Ford here at the FilmFile, joined as ever by the very mighty
Andy Meakin.
Andy Meakin. It's a Volk.
These intros get better every week. You introduce me as such, you big me up as though I'm something special. It just makes
Andy,
me feel...
you're special to me. You're special to the show. So moving swiftly along to this week's Deep Cut. Going back to the heady days of 1977, this American science fiction film, written and directed by Steven Spielberg, introduced us to the notion of we are not alone in the classic Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I'm not going to play a trailer. I'm just going to have me doing that.
I was going to do the come in flight number 657. 657, do you want to report a UFO? So this came out in 1977 on the back end of Star Wars, and it was really one of those films that is now has become part of the summer tradition. Big idea, big concept science fiction films. Spielberg was in familiar territory, having already done this with Jaws. Along came Star Wars, and then along came Close Encounters. The film starred Richard Dreyfuss as Roy Neary, an everyman, an electric lineman whose life is quite ordinary. I'll start again. An electric lineman watches his life and quite ordinary world turn upside down after a close encounter with a UFO. I'm going to get this out of the way right at the top end of this. I absolutely adore Close Encounters. As much as I adore Star Wars and Superman the movie from that period, it's a huge part of my growing up. It's a huge part of making me the person I am today, the film fan that I am, and that's down to Steven Spielberg's quite wonderful Close Encounters. I've seen it all its forms. I have a preferred version, which we'll get to as we go through, but I can't knock Close Encounters. I watched it very recently when I knew we were going to be doing this, and it still blows me away. It has drama. It has amazing special effects. It has an epic quality. It's painted on a huge canvas. However, at the heart of it is a very, very human story. And that's what really makes this film work. I'm currently reading an earlier draft written by Paul Schrader. And what Spielberg brought to this and what made it absolutely unique is by making his lead character and a typical guy, an everyman, a person whose life is turned upside down by the discovery and recognition of the idea that there are beings from other world, and he's brought into this bigger world than it's outside of his. Not concept. What's the term I'm thinking?
Outside of his
worldview. I'll go with word. Outside of his worldview. It's a fantastic notion that really brought Spielberg into being the director that he is, and of course paved the way for E.T. So that's initially my thoughts on on Close Encounters, Andy. What are yours?
So, as with yourself, this is a film that really hit me at an early age. This was one of those films, like with Star Wars, that I got to see on the big screen, and it drew me into a love of what can be done on the big screen, what can be done in film, and what can be done with sci-fi. Star Wars gave me action, it gave me adventure, it gave me lightsabers, it gave me thrills. This gave me conceptual sci-fi of a very downbeat nature, but with grand explorations. I've seen people gripe online about this over the past week, that nothing happens in the film, complaining that there's no excitement. But I think those people clearly miss the whole point of the film. It's a film about obsession with the unknown, where the thrills in the discovery that you aren't going crazy and you might get to touch that in which you truly believe. It's a simple tale of ordinary people affected by extraordinary events, and Spielberg tells this so perfectly. Um, you can see where Spielberg learned the lessons that he learned during making Jaws, because when he was making Jaws, he wanted to show the shark off very early on, but the way that the shark never worked meant he had to tease glimpses. He had to keep the shark hidden. And by learning that keeping things hidden make it more effective, benefits this film, because we only get small glimpses of light and craft early in the film. We get teasers of the wonders to come. And Spielberg knows what to show exactly and when. I mean, the early scene with Roy Neary's encounter in his truck is played out from inside the truck. You just see lights, and then a huge light, and then the truck is like lifted by gravity, and he's thrown about in it. But you don't see what did that, and that makes it all the more curious. It makes you engaged. It makes you understand how he's had this encounter. He doesn't know what with, and he's desperate to find out what with, and how it affects him throughout. You can follow that journey as it goes along. Spielberg saves the full reveals for a rather spectacular end, and boy, when it comes, is it spectacular. The
It's
detail on those crafts at the end are just wondrously beautiful. And adding in throughout the film this musical language in order to communicate that the encounters had kind of passed to humanity to try to decipher, it just took a whole new way of doing aliens.
I couldn't agree more, and it disappoints me to say that people have said this film that nothing happens, because an awful lot happens, an awful lot of internal drama, and this film is at its pure heart is a drama. It's about one man's sense of discovery, leaving his life behind for something that has changed him so remarkably. And as you said, the reveals of the UFOs are absolutely dramatically happen at the right place. Just when you don't think you're going to see anything, there's some kind of a light show as we see the initial UFOs. But Spielberg holds off. There's the impending sense of what's going to happen, and the first time you see the mothership appear over the top of the Devil's Tower in Wyoming, it's breathtaking. There's a sense of joy, a sense of apprehension, fear, and it all comes from that initial shot. And you know that those characters' of lives have been changed tremendously. I mean, Steven Spielberg started this as as one of his own handmade films, a film called Firelight,
Mm.
which incorporated a lot of the ideas of Close Encounters and what it became. And he spent a lot of time trying to get this made, and studios rejected it. You know, this is a film about flying saucers from outer space, and they just didn't get it. And then Jaws landed for him, and he was the biggest director in the world, and everybody wanted to work with him. As I said, he originally went to Paul Schrader to write the script. Paul Schrader, who gave us Taxi Driver, and Spielberg said that when he visited Schrader, it was one of the most disappointing and most embarrassing screenplays ever professionally turned into a major film studio. It was a terribly guilt-ridden story, not about UFOs at all, entitled Kingdom Come. And the protagonist was a 45-year-old Air Force officer who'd worked on Project Blue Book, and the government is there to ridicule and debunk flying saucers. But when he makes contact, he works on a mission to try and make contact, a long way removed from Spielberg's vision. And Spielberg sat down and wrote the script himself and worked with David Giler, who performed a rewrite. Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins were friends of Spielberg, suggested the plot device of kidnapping the child. And the story grew and turned out less to be Kingdom Come than to be the Close Encounters. The Close Encounters of the Third Kind that we know today. Interestingly enough, Spielberg, when he started making the film, reached out to the US Air Force and NASA, who declined to cooperate with the film, and in fact wrote a 20-page letter to Spielberg saying that this film was dangerous. And in Spielberg's own way, if NASA took the time to write that, then he knew there must be something happening and something they had to think about. It's a fantastic movie, works on many, many different levels, and works on those levels because he doesn't take the easy route. He goes with the small town guy, the everyman, fantastically portrayed by Richard Dreyfuss, and he incorporates himself into this and how a UFO encounter would change us. And that's the magic of the film. Not just the amazing special effects, the magic of what if it was us.
It's an amazing example, because up until this point, it's very rare that you got an alien invasion kind of film where the aliens weren't bad guys. This was a very optimistic first contact kind of approach to take to sci-fi, and Spielberg delivered it fantastically. And it's a theme that he would later explore with E.T., with another peaceful alien visiting Earth, but that played on a completely different level, but still had that optimistic, the aliens are not to be feared. We should be feared more than the aliens. It's a cracking film. And I originally saw, obviously, the original version when I was a kid. And then there was the special edition, which when that special edition first came out, where Spielberg got given a chance to go back and retouch things up, but he had to include an additional extension to the end scene to show the interior of the mothership. Something that he was insistent that he didn't want to do, but in order to get a chance to go back and make tweaks that he wanted to do, he had to agree to this. And I remember seeing that when it first came out and thinking, oh, wow, that's something different at the end, but never feeling as enamored by it. And it kind of nulled the film a bit for me. But then a good few years later, he had a chance to revisit it and do his director's cut, which he got a chance to add more scenes back in, but took away that inside the mothership ending. And he delivered, for me, the perfect version of it. The more recent director's cut version is the perfect representation of Spielberg's vision in this film. And that's the one that I revisited this past few weeks. And that's the one that I revisit every couple of years and love each and every time that I watch it.
I'm always enamored every time I watch it. And just like you, Andy, I go to the director's cut. It features the best moments out of the special edition, which is the ship in the Gobi Desert, for instance. It builds in smaller ways. What I missed from the special edition was the heartfelt moments that Dreyfuss has with his wife. And I really disliked them entering the mothership as much as you did, and clearly as much as Spielberg did. But this version is an absolute superb. It's a definitive version of Close Encounters. I forgot where I was going to go with that.
Yep.
I'll just make it a bit bolder. It is the definitive version of Close Encounters. And it just proves what a spectacular movie, that even after 40 odd years of it being out there, it can still be inspiring. I can still be awestruck by it, and I can fall in love with it the next time that I watch it. And I will watch it again and again, just like you, and I will keep going back and revisiting Close Encounters at the right time.
It's a film that when I revisit, there's some films that you revisit as comfort watchers and you'll half watch them while doing other things. But this is a film that when I revisit it, my attention is focused 100% on everything that's going on. Even though I know what's going on, I love to see it all unravel again on the screen in front of me.
Yeah, it's, as we talked about with Star Trek, a big ideas film in a way that some science fiction now, and I'm not just looking at you, Tomorrow War, but this is the kind of science fiction where it deals with big ideas and big themes, dramatically and beautifully put together and structured. And I kind of miss that side of Spielberg. We don't see that Spielberg anymore because he's grown, absolutely. But I do miss that Steven Spielberg very much.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying this show, then please go to your platform provider, to your podcast provider, and hit that subscribe button, because Andy and I need new clothes. And your donation to this subscription will help us get the Armani wardrobe we've always wanted. All you have to do is hit the subscription button and become part of the FilmFile family. And if you want to know more about the FilmFile, other than what we're wearing, which is just a little bit creepy, then you can do so by
heading over to Twitter and following at FilmFile UK. You can pop over to Instagram and see pictures of what we're wearing, FilmFile UK. You can email us podcast@filmfile.uk with any reviews, thoughts, suggestions, ideas, films that you want us to talk about, or just to give us a shout out and give us some feedback. We love to hear from you.
As we love doing the show. So that's the FilmFile. And as you know, if you are a regular listener, every week we do a deep dive into a classic movie. I'm kind of a I don't understand how we haven't done this film so far as part of our deep dives. And I'm going to get this out of the way. This is my all-time favorite horror movie. It's out there, so you're not going to hear any critique of John Carpenter's The Thing. Okay.
Insert trailer, which will no doubt just be dum dum.
Just that music alone.
Dum dum, and loads of snow, like blizzards.
Yeah, there was
blowing.
There was no. It was just music, I think.
Yeah.
In
So I'll probably do what I've done on other ones where it's been like that, and I'll take an actual sound clip.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that last week.
Yeah.
Okay. The film was released in 1982, and of course directed by the great John Carpenter, written by Bill Lancaster, and based on the 1935 novella Who Goes There by John W. Campbell. It had already been a film once, The Thing from Another World, which came out in 1951, but this version played much closer to what this version was a much more faithful adaptation of the I can't speak. But this version was a much more faithful adaptation of the original novella. It tells the story of a group of American researchers in Antarctica who encounter the eponymous Thing, a parasitic alien life form that assimilates, then imitates other organisms. The group is overcome by paranoia and conflict as they learn that they can no longer not only trust each other, but also trust themselves. It stars Kurt Russell as the team's helicopter pilot, R.G. McCready, and it also features Wilfred A. Brimley, T.K. Carter, David Clennon, Keith David, Richard Dysart, Charles Hellenan, Peter Maloney, Richard Mouser, Donald Muffet, Joe Pollis, and George G. Waits in supporting roles, and it was very much a guy-only story. As I said at the get-go, I absolutely adore this movie. It plays to the right side of paranoia. It plays to the right side of clever. It never fails to surprise me, even though I probably know this film beat for beat. It's John Carpenter at the top of his game. I don't think he's done anything better. I've done stuff that I've liked as much, but I don't think as a director he ever did anything. Interestingly enough, the film was a huge flop when it came out, but earned its reputation on home video, and over the years is now considered to be an absolute classic. And of course, it is an absolute classic. To me, it draws parallels with kind of things like Agatha Christie, and then there were none. A small group of isolated characters who are feeding into each other's paranoia, let alone the threat of an alien being. And the same could be said that Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight borrowed heavily from The Thing. Andy, tell me your thoughts on The Thing.
So The Thing is my go-to film whenever people start moaning about remakes. As soon as a remake is announced and people inevitably say, oh, Hollywood has no original ideas anymore and they need to stop remaking things, I throw out, if they never remade things, we wouldn't have a film as great as The Thing. Because the original film that you've already mentioned, The Thing from Another World, which was the previous adaptation of Who Goes There, I mean, I love The Thing from Another World. It's a classic of that B-movie sci-fi of the 50s. It had a great McCarthyism approach to the paranoia going on within there. It had a great design of like the almost human kind of vegetation creature. But like you say, it didn't draw from the book as faithfully as what John Carpenter's version did. John Carpenter's version used the names. It used a more supernatural, menacing kind of creature in something that can adapt its form and change and mutate whilst absorbing mannerisms and characteristics of everything around it. And it's such a great film. And I've loved this film since I first saw it on VHS as a kid. Early teens, I would have been.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd have been just turning through into my teens, and it was that early era of VHS. And this was a film that I was aware of when it was getting released at the cinema because I used to sit up and watch Barry Norman on his film show. I remember seeing clips of the film on that and then realised that I wasn't 18 yet and there was no way I could go and see it because when you're only 11, you're not allowed to go and see films like that. And I was obsessed with it before I saw it. And then when I saw it, I was completely engrossed in it because, let's be honest, the effects work on this are what draw you in when you're young. This is a film that really sells itself on the horror aspect, the twisted nature. And it's over as you grow up with the film and revisit it, then you start to get more involved in the characters, the drama, the tension. But the initial impact is all about how this film looks. And the effects in this, I must have broke the VHS tape multiple times. I'd have to stick it back together with sellotape from just constantly pausing and rewinding, because I've tried. Who did the effects?
Rob Bottin.
Rob Bottin. Because Rob Bottin's creations are
And they are that, aren't they? They are creations.
They are utter creations. They're frighteningly twisted, creatively chilling, and perfectly used. An unfolding dog, a chest cavity bite, a head that grows spider legs. Everything is twisted and horrific to perfection and still stands up to scrutiny today. They are such perfect effects. Like I said, I saw this initially on VHS and I rewatched it with my mates over and over again through my teenage years. I first got a chance to see this on the big screen around 20 years ago when UGC Cinemas screened it as a classic choice. The print was scratched and damaged, but it didn't diminish the experience of seeing the film in that environment. In more recent years, I've seen like a digital restoration on the big screen, and it was perfection. The same way that seeing a digitally restored Alien on the big screen for the first time was a whole new experience. Seeing a digital restored version of this was, again, a whole new experience. And like I say, over time, my attention has moved away from just obsessing about the great effects work to the characters, to the cast. And the cast are marvellous in it. I believe that Kurt Russell was already attached to the project before he was cast. He was the last person to be cast out of everyone.
Yeah, and the character went through many transformations. He was a little bit like the original movie. He was the square jawed leading man. But when Bill Lancaster came on, sorry, I'll start again. When Bill Lancaster came on board to write it, they took the characters down. There were initially 37 in the book, down to 12. And to try to create this ensemble piece where somebody emerged as a hero rather than having them as a hero from the start, and you can see that interested Kurt Russell in the way that he performs. He's not there to be the hero. The
Yeah.
McCready character has just fallen into it, and it's about survival. And he's the only one with enough common sense to keep himself alive, and that's what's interesting. And it has a dour edge to the entire film, which I think is one of the reasons it back in the early 80s it didn't find its audience. It was maybe perhaps too dour. I mean, Carpenter came along quite late into the game. There'd been a lot of several writers who'd been developing drafts for the thing, including Logan's Run's writer William F. Nolan, which we'll talk about later. There were many drafts. One that was set partially underwater, which was kind of described as a Moby Dick-like story, where the captain did battle with a large, non-shape-shifting creature. Carpenter wasn't impressed with any of the previous interpretations of the script and wanted to change the story back into the chameleon-like aspect of the thing. And talked to many different writers and then settled on Bill Lancaster, who was probably best known at that point for writing The Bad News Bears, which, while not a film that ever did well in this country, in America, it's got huge cult-like status to it. And they developed the story together, and apparently that process alone was difficult and went through several endings. And you can't talk about the thing without talking about the ending. So spoilers if you've not had a chance to see an almost a 40-year-old movie with a fantastic ending. But it is just so downbeat and so has such an ominous tone that runs through it that never lets up. I think a lot of modern horror has these elements of laughs just to help you get over, one element of horror, and then you have a bit of a smile, and then you get onto the next one. This is constantly a movie about tension, the trust elements. Who are the people you think they are? Is there a way out of it? Are you who you think you are? It's just an absolutely stunning film which succeeds on absolutely every level.
I think one thing that helps with the tension between the characters is that even at the start, before the thing is there, this is a group of researchers who have been forced to work together through circumstances and don't necessarily get along anyway. And so there's already some tension there. And the thing being involved in it just escalates that tension and paranoia to more levels. It's a similar kind of approach to the laid-back workers who are just doing their mundane, routine jobs that we saw Carpenter tackle with Dark Star. You've got a very similar kind of aesthetic with the kind of characters who are just like big beards and just hanging out. Interesting to note that I read somewhere that Kurt Russell took him about 18 months to grow such a beautiful bit of facial fuzz, to look the right part. These days they'll just put an artificial one on, but he spent 18 months in pre-production growing that beard so that he could just go through it. And now he's become quite well known for his rather graceful beards in quite a lot of roles since. We've not mentioned the score, the music that accompanies this film.
Yes, well, I mean, it's one of the things of legend, the score. They tapped the great Italian composer Ennio Morricone to produce the score. And then Carpenter wrote bits and pieces of music, uncredited of it, if I remember correctly, for it. And some of the score that Morricone produced didn't get used until it got used on Tarantino's Hateful Eight.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that John Carpenter films always had unique approaches to the score and the music, and this, I think, is his most perfect score. It's like a heartbeat pulse rhythm that underlies the scoring that just drives it along and keeps the tension mounting. It's as though you're hearing your own heartbeat starting to panic as everything's escalating through it. Absolutely brilliant. I love this film, and rewatching it this past week in order to just get fresh eyes from it. It's again another one of those films that as soon as it's on, I'm not distracted by anything. I also went on to rewatch The Thing from Another World, and also went on to rewatch for the first time the 2011 prequel
Yeah.
which I'd only seen when it initially released at the big screen, and I wasn't that enamored with it then. It's okay. With fresh eyes, I've kind of got a bit more from it, but it was the problem with the 2011 prequel is that it doesn't know if it's a prequel or a remake, because it basically is set in the Norwegian outpost that precedes this film, but it then plays exactly the same scenes and exactly the same beats as John Carpenter's version, making it completely pointless.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk of sequels. Ronald D. Moore, who's probably best known for
Mm.
Battlestar Galactica, had intended to do a sequel, and then that developed into being a mini series for TV. The prequel is just okay, but it's just unnecessary. It doesn't add that much into the mythos because you know where it's going. In fact, spoiler, the last few shots of the film basically echo the beginning of John Carpenter's The Thing. So it's just redundant. It's not a bad movie. It's not badly made. I think there was a better movie in the script than actually got made, but ultimately it was just pointless. Probably the best sequel to The Thing was a Dark Horse comic where it was called Thing from
Mm.
Another World, which carried on with the absolutely fantastic nihilistic ending of the original with the McCready character, which is probably as close that you will get to a great sequel to The Thing, and worth checking out if you can find it anywhere. I've got the limited series run, but it was a fantastic story. And there is, again, as ever, there is talk of either a remake or another version of The Thing or a sequel to The Thing in some kind of form of production, but nothing will take away from John Carpenter's, because he had the guts to make something that was nihilistic, that was depressing, that had a different kind of viewpoint. And as I said, this wasn't a successful film. It went up after the critically and commercially successful E.T., which is more of a family friendly version of an Alien. Um, Opened the same day as Blade Runner, and it only went on to earn um, 33.8 million, but it was
Mm.
regarded as a critical and commercial failure at the time. But it found its home on home video, and for that very reason that you mentioned, that you went, oh my god, I can't believe I've seen that, and you go back and you rewatch it and go, oh my god, that's amazing. How did they do that? And it's still one of those films there where you look at and go, how did they get this done? Because it's all practical effects, and it's absolutely brilliant. It still to this day, it just gets better. When some films don't age well, the thing about The Thing is it just ages and keeps changing and changing into something new with every viewing.
I don't think we can speak any further after that analogy.
If you want to watch The Thing, it is available on home release. And is it out there on the streaming services, Andy? I know it was.
Only for rental at the moment. It's not available for free streaming.
If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor. Pick a night, no disturbances, and watch The Thing.